Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Lynne O'Donnell. Apparently, we're being joined from across the world by hundreds of people, which is really terrific because often it's easy to think that Afghanistan has fallen completely off the radar. This year, 2021, marks the 20th anniversary of the start of the latest phase of war in Afghanistan. As we know, there's been conflict there for more than 40 years since the Soviet invasion. The 9/11 attacks of 2001 on the United States were perpetrated by Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden while he was the guest of the Taliban, then ruling most of Afghanistan. The invasion launched by the United States and its allies in October 2001 was in retribution for the 9/11 attacks. It led to the fall of the Taliban, the installation of a Western-friendly, sometimes unfriendly, government, the introduction of a democratic experiment, and the constitutional protection of a range of rights, including for women. Fast forward 20 years. Many people like to say that it hasn't so much been 20 years of war as 20 years of war, so many generals, so many strategies. And then along came President Donald Trump, who did a bilateral agreement with the Taliban that completely bypassed the Afghan government in Kabul, ostensibly democratically elected, under the umbrella of Western support. Now Joe Biden is in the US president's seat. He inherited the Trump-Taliban deal, which calls for a drawdown to zero of US forces by May the 1st. That's in 3 weeks' time. Let's see what happens. And the allies who have been in Afghanistan for the best part of 2 decades, like Germany, are likely to leave if and when Biden does too. So what we're here this evening to discuss is where we are now and how we got here. Afghanistan's only Pulitzer Prize winner, Massoud Hossaini, and British Army combat photographer, Rupert Frere, will present us with a selection of their photographs. They'll talk about why they've chosen the pictures they have and contrast the work they've done, one in uniform, one very much not in uniform. And they're also here to launch a crowdfunding website for an exhibition later this year of their work called Afghanistan 20 Years On, which will be held in London initially, possibly in other places as well. And it'll showcase a much larger number of their photographs to tell hopefully a definitive history of the last 20 years of war in Afghanistan. The website is called Afghanistan20years.com, very kindly put together by Olivia Hamilton, who I hope is with us from Toronto, and Ben Hall, who served in Uruzgan with the Australian Army, is here in London, and it'll be accessible on the website of the Frontline Club as well. And before we get to the picture show with Rupert and Massoud, let's talk to 2 Afghan experts in their field, Weeda Mehran, joining us from Toronto, and Waliullah Rahmani, who, like Massoud, is in Kabul. Welcome to you both. They'll set the scene for us, bringing us bang up to date from Taliban times to today. Weeda Mehran, she's an Afghan academic. She lived under the Taliban's regime and its draconian laws. She has first-hand experience of closure of girls' schools, for instance. Her family, like millions of others, went to Pakistan, where she did her secondary school education, and then she went on a scholarship to Canada and got her undergrad degree at Toronto University, and then followed her dream to go to both Oxford and Cambridge universities here in the UK. She has a PhD in politics and international studies at Cambridge, where she's also a member of the Karate Club. And she teaches at the University of Exeter. Her research focuses on terrorism and conflict. Dr. Mehran, welcome and thanks for joining us. It's so good to have you here. How about you bring us up to date? I doubt anyone who's with us this evening doesn't know about the 9/11 attacks or the role of the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, etc. But what a lot of people might not know, if I may be so bold, is what's been achieved since the fall of the Taliban in 2001. So can you bring us up to date on what's been gained and by whom, and what's now at risk and why?
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with the Frontline Club, and thank you very much for inviting me to attend this event. And it's good afternoon to all the audience and my co-panelists. A lot has been achieved since 2001. Just the mere fact that the doors to schools have been opened for girls is a huge achievement, although there are still lots of issues in terms of attendance, girls' attendance to schools. Nonetheless, in many parts of the country, girls have managed to go to school. Women have had the opportunity to gain an education, higher education at higher education institutions, take part in social, economic, and political life in the country. We have a parliament with the highest number of women representatives, with a quota entering the parliament of Afghanistan. Women have been present in Afghan national security forces in the country, amongst the police force, amongst the army, and we have female politicians. And this women's participation in these social, political, and security life in the country by no means has been symbolic. These are women who are actively engaged in various aspects of life in the country. Access to healthcare is another achievement in the country, that women's access to healthcare services in many parts of the country, which was many parts of the country was non-existent under the Taliban's regime. It has been revived since 2001. That being said, there are still lots of challenges. Of course, 4 decades of conflict in Afghanistan has had its toll on the country. The poverty rates are still alarming. More than 55% of the population live below poverty line. Afghanistan still ranks pretty low, 170 out of 189 on the Human Development Index. And still, despite the achievements, we have more than 4 million children out of the schools in the country. With the current security situation, that has become even worse because of the security challenges imposed by the Taliban and other insurgent groups. Now, Biden's administration, the challenge that is facing the inheriting a peace talk process, which started and initiated and started by Trump's administration, a hasty process that in a bid for President Trump to win support during last presidential elections in the US, the administration entered into an agreement, which essentially can be dubbed as a troops withdrawal agreement rather than any peace agreement. Because what was at stake there, that the promise was given to the Taliban that the American troops would be withdrawn from Afghanistan, so that the Taliban, upon the condition that the Taliban would sever ties with Al-Qaeda, reduce violence, and enter into negotiations with the Afghan government. As you mentioned, the major problem with this agreement and the process of how it was conducted was that the Afghan government, democratically elected government, yes, there has been issues with that process. Nonetheless, democratically elected government was bypassed altogether. The government was not present at the US Taliban talks. And despite the promises that the Taliban made during the US Taliban talk, rates of violence has not been reduced in the country. In fact, the whole process actually emboldened the Taliban to attack Afghan national security forces, specifically target them, and also attack intellectuals, and attack our media and journalists, particularly female journalists in the country. And I'm sure Mr. Rahmani is going to speak about these issues in much more detail. And on top of that, the condition that was posed that the Taliban will sever ties with Al-Qaeda has not happened. In fact, there are Security Council reports by the UN Security Council that it shows that during the whole process of talks, the Taliban has been in touch with Al-Qaeda. received their blessings for the talks. And through my own research, the peace talks, the agreement, the US Taliban agreement, was actually presented by Al-Qaeda and the Taliban publications as a major achievement for the Taliban itself. And as I mentioned, since the agreement in February 2020, there has been increase in violence against civilians, target killings in the country, and particularly the intellectuals, highly educated Afghans in the cities, and also particularly women and female journalists in the country, which has led to another wave of brain drain in the country that is a major problem. And it also the mere fact that the women in Afghanistan haven't been present during the Doha meetings, for example. They didn't have a strong presence, and also only one female negotiator was present in the Moscow meeting. It is quite concerning for women in Afghanistan, and generally for the population in Afghanistan, that if the Taliban are incorporated back into the government, the achievements that have been made in terms of women's rights, democratic values, freedom of speech, and minority rights in general will be at stake. These are serious and major concerns that currently people in Afghanistan are facing.
Well, thank you, Weeda. Thank you very much for that short but sharp detail of where we are now. I'd like to turn to Waliullah Rahmani, who is joining us from Kabul, where it's quite late at night. So thanks for your time, Waliullah. Waliullah is the founder and director of Kharbanaba News Agency, which is a digital news platform, and also Reporterly AF, which is a Twitter feed on breaking news out of Afghanistan, and it also provides a subscription-only daily service on political developments in Afghanistan, and I find it very useful. As I said, he's in Kabul, and he's going to pick up where Weeda left off to give us an overview of the security situation in Kabul specifically, and in Afghanistan generally. I mean, we waited, didn't we, for the promised reduction in violence, which never came. Quite the opposite. It's been really quite tough there on the ground. Can you give us an overview from where you are, Waliullah, of how you see the situation, not only since the February 29, 2020 agreement, but specifically in the last few months after the so-called peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban started in mid-September last year?
Yeah, Lynn, thank you so much, and thanks to the Frontline Club. And of course, I'm glad to talk from Kabul, while, as you mentioned, and our fellow colleagues in the panel talked about, the situation is not that good. It's not because of many reasons, I think, and one of that is because the intra-Afghan talks, which we expected all to end to a sort of like reduction in violence and to into sort of political stability in the country, has not answered, unfortunately. I don't talk about the reasons why they have not answered, but one thing is clear, that the situation on the ground is quite disturbing, especially for a list of people who are in various sectors, particularly the journalists, the civil society activists, and those who are as political activists and in the middle level of the state of Afghanistan, not only the government. So I think in the last 6 months, the situation has changed so brutal that I and many of our friends in Kabul who are out of homes, in the morning, many would can you hear me?
Yes, you're back again. We lost you for a second there. Go on. You're talking
Yeah.
about people
Yeah.
afraid to leave their homes. I mean, you know, the Biden administration, it's been made pretty clear that the troops will pull out, if not on May the 1st, then within 2020. And this, that there is the possibility of an interim government, of Ashraf Ghani being forced to step down and the Taliban being brought back into the heart of power. What's that likely to mean if it comes to fruition for people like you, educated, erudite, entrepreneurial? I think it's pretty important to remember that Afghanistan's population of 36, 38 million is predominantly aged under 30. I think about 70% of the population of the country is aged under 30. What do you think, Waliullah, they've got to look forward to if this, you know, the so-called Blinken?
I was coming to that, you know, the past 6 months has been scary. The situation has been so bleak, and it has been quite unpromising. So it has put like the entire picture of the political system in the country and the constitutional order that's governing Afghanistan has been put in question. So that's what what Taliban wanted to portray and to achieve in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, right now, for a shorter term, right now we know where the country is heading. We see the Istanbul summit that's coming. We see that in 10 days there would be some discussions around the potential ceasefire and a political settlement. But in the longer run, as you mentioned, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what will be a new constitutional order, how will that new constitutional order act, and what will be the future of all the achievements we have gained as a generation that has come out of the last 20 years in Afghanistan, the principal rights that we had achieved, and all, especially the freedom of media and press. So these are all the questions that exist about the future of the country, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Waliullah, for giving us that rundown. Now it's time to introduce Massoud and Rupert. As I said earlier, they've selected a number of photographs to share with us, which they'll speak to. Anyone who has any questions for any of our participants, please share them in the Q&A box. What I'm hoping to do is come to some of our viewers later on in the presentation for a bit of a Q&A. But right now I'm going to allow Rupert and Massoud to tell you about themselves, because they can do that much better than I can. So Massoud, why don't we start with you? Born in Kabul, raised in Iran, you returned to Afghanistan in 2002 and began to develop your interest in photography. So, and you have a photograph of yourself in action to start us off. So over to you. You'll have to unmute. Unmute.
Sorry.
There you go. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, everyone, and hello, everyone. I hope that I can explain my pictures as well as I can, and also I have to actually I really like to say my thanks first of all to Lynne, that helped me a lot that this happening right now, and also a special thanks to Frontline that will help us for crowdfunding for our exhibition in London. Actually, what I will show you here is really less than whatever that I saw in these 20 years of Afghanistan history. And I hope that happen and we all meet in London as well. So you see the picture, I'm in the middle taking the camera with the helmet and the flak jacket in Helmand. It was a really difficult embed, to be honest, because we didn't have any place. We had to stay at the destroyed house somewhere out of village. And during the day, when the army and Marines, I think, were coming to patrol in the village. So I was going with them, but definitely because I was different, but I mean, compared to the soldiers and the militaries. So people were not really, get away from me because they knew that I have camera, and also they could understand that I am a photographer. So what I say about this picture that I remember is that if you see, I was using hat, under the helmet. And actually, to be honest, many military people were not really happy about that. But I was, doing the style that I had actually. So I think it's, what should I say? I was born in Kabul in 1981. And then we fled to Iran, my family. I grew up in Iran without knowing anything about my own country. And after 2001, I was so excited after all, process and everything, Bonn happened and all other process. I was so excited to come to Afghanistan. So I crossed the border, and I got really, really sad because I saw my own homeland completely destroyed, and there were a lot of poor children around. And I kind of promised myself as do whatever I can for my own country, because the time that I entered into Afghanistan, I felt that now I have home. Now I have a place that I am belongs to. So I really wanted to do, to do my best for my own country. But in 2005, after 2005, the war gets really, really, much hot actually. And I thought that all war will be finished in 2009, and then everybody will start their own normal life in Afghanistan, as I really wish that happened, but never happened. So what I did, I also tried to cover and kind of record the war for the first time as an Afghan, and I wanted to be source for other people who wanted to know about Afghanistan war, because whenever I was going to read the history and see the pictures were probably from British soldiers or probably from some other foreigners, and nobody had any, serious and good documentary of the pictures from Afghanistan people and from Afghan eyes. So I tried my best to do that actually. Lynne?
Yeah, well, there is. We have a question starting to come in, Massoud. Mark Galloway asks, can you indicate the value and impact of independent reporting on Afghanistan and its future? Does it help in any way? And David Short asks, aside from saying he's looking forward to the exhibition of your work and Rupert's, can you say what the reaction to photography is among the general population? So I suppose he's asking you, how do people react to you, and how as a photographer, how important is your work, do you think, to your countrymen?
For sure that many people, especially among the intellectuals and my friends, will appreciate what I was doing. But unfortunately, the government, all government, Karzai government and Ghani government, never appreciate and never understand what we are doing. So in the Afghan side, in the public, people really appreciate whenever they see me and they find opportunity that we talk, especially like today, that it was a opening of a cultural center in Pulitzer of Kabul. So they ask me about going on, what's going on, and do you think you will have more, I mean, positive pictures about what we are facing right now, and how we can see more positive picture of you. But unfortunately, the situation is not something that I can, I mean, lie them actually. So I tell them the truth and saying that, well, probably those difficult times and those sad pictures that I already are taking from like 2002 might be repeated again. So this is what I can say them. But yeah, definitely people appreciate a lot.
Okay, great. Thanks, Massoud. We'll go over to Rupert now, and I think what we'll do is one each of you until we get through all your photos, so that people can appreciate the contrasts in your approach. Rupert, would you like to introduce yourself? We've got a photo of you in action, and you can tell us something about yourself and your work and how you go about it.
Hi, I remember to unmute, which is always a good start. My name's Rupert Frere. I'm a serving army photographer. Don't be fooled by the beard. I'm on leave, so I'm taking full advantage of growing some facial hair. I've been a photographer since 2007, when I transferred as a corporal within the army. We do a majority of different work. My experience with Helmand, particularly in Afghanistan, I've never been to Kabul, so I've mainly worked around Helmand province. I'd done 3 tours of duty there as a photographer, and experienced different factors of what we do there. My job's very different in quite a lot of ways. My main role of what I do is documenting what the soldiers are doing out there, or our partner forces, the Afghan army, the Afghan police, and people like that when we're out there. The easiest way to kind of explain what I'm going to do, there should be a video which we can quickly watch if that works, which sort of shows what the difference between what I do. I don't know if that's going to work.
No, I'm not sure. Well, let's get back to that. Let's move on and see if we can bring up the video, which is very short and very powerful, in a little while. Massoud, your second photo. Let's go to that and have a look. We've got a couple more questions coming in that you might be able to talk over as well. David Beachy asks, how do you see your career progressing if and when the Taliban do return? Oh, hang on a second. We've got Rupert's video coming up. This is very powerful and certainly worth watching. So over to you, back to you, Rupert.
I think if you can hear it, I'm not sure the sound's working, but ultimately the difference between my job is that at least when I go out on the ground and I'm taking photographs, I'm also a soldier, so I'm armed. So in this state here, this is my helmet camera that I'm using, and we were ambushed as we were crossing over open ground. So unlike Massoud, who's out there and taking pictures and putting himself in that situation, I'm going out there with patrols. I'm still on my own. I still operate around theatre pretty much as an individual most of the time and move from unit to unit. So you still have that. And these are the pictures I was taking. The odd thing is about being a photographer is that although that soldier, oh, it's disappeared again. As you can see from that short clip there, I'm operating the camera as well as the rifle there, and all the time that I'm taking those, taking shots, I'm thinking I need to be taking photographs, not firing the rifle, because you have that kind of guilt. But ultimately, my training as a soldier comes over, and you're in a contact, and someone's trying to operate you. But I'm thinking I need to photograph what the soldiers are doing and how we're progressing. So it's a different story. It's definitely a different side of the aspect that Massoud looks at for what we do. So it's different.
Yes, but I think that short video is so powerful. It does show exactly the situation that you're in, and you do very different things. Might be fair to say that a lot of what Massoud does is more reactive, whereas you're right in the thick of it, as you say, a soldier with a camera. Massoud, let's go back to you. Take yourself off mute and let's have a look at your second photo.
Yes. Well, this is a photo that I took in Kabul in 2007. There was the Eid in the end of Ramadan, which right now we are in the beginning of the Ramadan next week. So in the end of it, there is an Eid that people are happy, and if there is a security, so they go to the parks and having fun. So I used these pictures to, as I told you in the beginning, that I thought that the war will be finished in 2009. I thought that it would be finished in 2009. So I was trying to show, hope and a smile, and those young people who were they had a life ahead, and they wanted to kind of plan and or decide to do something in the next, actually. So this lady was in the park and having fun. I don't know what we call it, that swing thing, but she was really happy and she was really hopeful. And for sure that because it's Afghanistan, I had to ask her after that she came, down of that thing. So I asked her that, all right, I took this picture. I'm gonna show these pictures to the world. Do you have problem or not? And before that, she answered me, her mother answered and said that, no, show it, see that we are so happy now. We have Eid, we have her father has job, and she has a good clothes, and she's beautiful, she's pretty, show it. And that's why that I took this picture. I was working for AFP, and just to let you know that I had another exhibition in 2008 in Germany, in Berlin, and this picture was a opening poster for that exhibition.
It's a beautiful photo. We've got a couple of questions you might want to address now. As I was saying before, David Beachy has asked, how do you see your career progressing if and when the Taliban do come back? Oops, lost him. Richard Pendry asks, what risks do you run, Massoud, in doing your work, and does the Taliban think that your pictures are competition for their own messaging?
Well, first of all, for the first question, for sure, if the Taliban comes back, all media will be silent. Everybody have to leave. And I'm right now, as a freelancer, cannot work with them because they will have a lot of rules that nobody in the world use that kind of, rules in a country in the 21st century. So for sure that if Taliban comes back, which I always hope not, I have to stop my job here, and I have to immigrate again. So for the second, what was the second question? Sorry, Lynn?
The second question
Lynn?
was what risks do you take, Massoud, in doing your work? And do the Taliban see you as competition?
Well, for sure that if Taliban see me with the national army or foreign troops, for sure that they will shoot me in the head, actually. So I remember I was in Panjwai in Kandahar, and there was Al-Qaeda sniper, and the soldiers all the time were telling me, Massoud, whenever you walk, you have to walk really close to the wall or a vehicle, that the sniper doesn't shoot you or doesn't kill you. So it's the same in Taliban neighborhood too. Well, Taliban using media really well for own purposes, but if they see a photographer in their neighborhood, they will definitely think that we are spy, and we are there to scan or to find Taliban, or I mean, to make some danger for them. So this is what their soldiers being trained for. They are blind, and they are deaf, and they don't understand what is media, what is photographer, what is camera, unfortunately. And if they take me and capture me in their own territory, they definitely will kill me. So when I go to their neighborhood, so definitely I have to accept this risk, and to cover and to record what I said in the beginning for my own country. I always did that till now.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Massoud. Rupert, let's go back to you and your next photograph. Here we go.
I chose this one first, as I think it's a bit of a scene setter. This was, I just trained sort of 6 months after I'd trained to be a photographer within the army and transferred. This is my first job out on the front line with 405 Royal Marine Commando, and it was their kind of final patrol, and it was everything I kind of imagined about Helmand Province in one picture, the poppies. It was also one of the first pictures I had published in a newspaper, in Telegraph, back at home. So kind of felt that it's not the best technically, the sky's a bit blown out, but it's always one of these pictures that's meant quite a lot to me and tells a bit of the story about the patrols out there and the beauty of Helmand Province with the poppies, which are quite synonymous around there. And that's why I chose this one. And it was a big learning curve, that tour. I had a sergeant with me at that, and it was done with a combat camera team. So that time I was quite lucky. It was as an individual. So I had someone there kind of mentoring me, who helped me out a lot with that. But I just found that picture quite an interesting one.
I think I saw it in the National Army Museum last year when we were still able to go out and about. It was part of an exhibition they had. It's a very powerful and beautiful photo at the same time.
Thank you.
I think, Massoud, your next photo is on the screen already, taken in a Chinook. Over to you.
Sure.
Where and when
Yes.
now?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the last picture of Rupert. Actually, the opium has a really good flower, right? It's really beautiful, to be honest, especially in Helmand and in Nangarhar in Jalalabad. Anyway, so this is the one of my first embed to the south of Helmand. So there was a report in one of the British papers, I forgot the name of that paper, saying that Garmsir was like a empty city, and no alive people were there. So I tried a lot to have an embed to go to Garmsir, and finally Marines, the US Marines gave me this opportunity, and I went with them. If you see these two helicopters, in the helicopter that I was sitting, there was only me and two soldiers, and the other helicopter also was like probably 4 or 5. And then because it was my first time, and for sure that any photographers when cover some places or something for the first time, they would be so excited and try to take as much as they can. So I really tried to take this picture, and I had to wait a lot. You know, I couldn't open the belt for sure, and I had to do really difficult turn to take this picture. And the soldier, the Marines that were sitting there, I tried to have her face, actually, at least the line of her face as a silhouette or shadow, but for sure that because I couldn't open the belt, I couldn't take that face. But finally I took this picture after a real too much trying actually. And this was a picture of the this was the picture of AFP Photo of the Year in 2008.
So it's a great shot. I've cocked up so many shots on the back of helicopters, particularly when you get off. This is my always the journey out there. I always take my camera with me, and I'm not a massive fan of flying anyway. So I've always tried to find like things to do when I'm flying out there. And this is in the final leg on the way into Afghanistan, and everyone's sort of tired, and it's been quite a long journey up to this point. And I managed to climb up on top of an escape ramp and take this picture, and it's been used quite a lot. At the time I didn't think much of it, but it's always one of those things that I think the journey out there is as much pressure as it's even more so. Everyone, you know, has either been out there before at this point or it's their first tour, and everyone's tired. And I always found that's really part of the story of going out there and documenting what the soldiers are doing out in theatre. It's not all about just what's going on the ground. It's the whole journey and how we go over there. So I always try to just tell that story. And I think this shot pretty much sums that up quite well off the journey out there.
Yeah.
This is yours, Massoud.
Yes. This is well, actually, really sad picture. I tweet this picture, and somebody retweeted me back like 2 days ago and saying that why you're using child pictures in the social media, blah 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 blah. But well, this is what I'm doing to show the really ugly face of war in my own country. I have to do it. If I don't show this, then nobody will understand that which kind of pain we are go through actually. So unfortunately, this is a teenage boy that he was sitting beside his father in a car, in a vehicle. But during the Taliban, several kind of vehicle came to Afghanistan, actually import to the Afghanistan. The one which is in the left side and the one move from the right side. So the car of her father was the wrong side actually in Afghanistan, and he was sitting in the place of the driver as we normally use the direction in Afghanistan. So one of the foreign troops, well, they kind of warned the vehicle to stop, but probably the driver, his father, didn't understand. And then they shoot, and they thought that they shoot in the side of the driver. But unfortunately, this child was sitting there, and so she's been killed. If you see the hands are his father's hands, and I was completely on the shoulder. I tried too much to take this picture from the way that his father watching his son's dead body before burying him. So it was too difficult. The father was crying loudly and were telling some kind of words that I couldn't understand. But I just tried to show the scene of his father, what his father was, seeing from the dead body of his son, to reflect the same feeling that the father had.
Indeed. I just want to interrupt and with a question from Jenny Morgan, who would like to know from you, Waliullah, if you could say more about the conditions of life and work for journalists and other media workers. You did touch on that before, the targeted killings and the violence that has upticked since September. Could you go into a little bit more detail about that for Jenny, please?
Of course. Unfortunately, up to now, around 10 journalists or more have been killed in the past 3-4 months in Afghanistan in different parts of the country, particularly in Kabul, Kandahar, and Jalalabad. And one of the most brutal ones happened just a couple of weeks back in Jalalabad city, where 3 female media workers of a TV station were killed in an evening. So, so that is like the worst situation you could have for your journalists. And with my organization, due to all these security threats, because we are an online digital media, we have put our colleagues, at home, and their safety is one of the most important points here. The physical security, the psychological, security that we need to have out of like having physical security, and the protection that's needed is not much there, particularly, especially being in Kabul. So let alone having people around the country. That's one part of the situation. The other part is the uncertainty that looms large, about the future of the country. I always stay positive. I always stay hopeful about Afghanistan, and we believe that we don't have any other. We should not have any other option but to go forward with a democratic order. In this generation that have lived and raised the past 20 years, they should be able to practice their principal rights in this country. But unfortunately, the realities on the ground is something different. So there is a huge uncertainty that's going on about the future of the country. And we don't know really if there is an interim government, what will be the future constitutional order, and how and who will protect the principal rights, particularly the rights of the freedom of speech and the media that are here and operating around the country.
Okay, thanks for that, Waliullah. I hope that answers your question, Jenny. We're going to go back to Rupert and his next photo, but maybe Rupert, you can answer a question while you're explaining your next picture about whether or not you have been in a situation where you've wanted desperately to take a photograph and haven't been able to. Who's asking that? Sarah Hamilton is asking that. Tell us about this photograph and tell us whether or not you found yourself being banned from, censored from publishing, or being desperate to take a photo and the situation wasn't right.
Well, I'll start with this picture. Yeah, so this is very much a photograph which sums up my time in Afghanistan over my 3 tours. Is young men being out there and living like this, all as much as combat and all those bits that I've seen and the things that I've been through out there. This sort of summed up a lot more of the life, which was just living in the compounds and going out on a patrol and doing what we were doing best, which was to secure the area and doing what what was right at the time. So and this guy's an 18-year-old who just got out there on his 18th birthday, called John Bryan, and I followed him around for a bit. As much as have I ever been censored on what I'm doing? I censor myself on what I'm doing. I've got certain ethics and certain rules that I follow by on what I will and won't photograph. Sometimes I have to photograph things that I don't particularly want to photograph. It's publishing it, that's the difference. So I might photograph someone having treatment after an IED, but I wouldn't put it out for the public consumption because it's not what they want to see, a soldier having that. However, for training or for to go back, then that would be needed. But as far as it's concerned, is that no, I mean, I'm there with a camera, I'm there to do a job, so I'm there to photograph and document what's going on, the same as anybody else with it. It's down to my own eyes. Sometimes I've decided that I don't actually want to take a picture of that. So
understand. Massoud, have you found yourself, well, here's your next photo, snow on a roof in Kabul. Tell us a little bit about that. And also, have you been in situations, as Sarah asked, where you've desperately wanted to take a photo, haven't been able to, your news agency hasn't wanted to publish?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is of Kabul in 2008, the area that mostly Hazara tribe people are living there. And there was a really heavy and cold winter. And to take this picture, I had to lie down on the ground to have this, what I wanted actually, this frame. And well, when I was taking this picture, many children and some women were just were around me and was asking me that, what are you doing? What are you doing? So also about the question that you asked, well, yes, there was a lot of, pictures that I wanted to take, or when I took, then I couldn't show it, or probably it was not really, ethical to show it because they were women or children on that picture in a really bad condition. Even there were some pictures that when when the bomb goes off, whoever is close to the bomb will be naked, let's say in this way, will lose the clothes actually. And sometimes it was several times that I was in the exact time of the explosion in the public area, and I saw that kind of picture, and I took pictures actually of those a naked body and wounded and full of the blood. And well, honestly, I wanted to show that what war is doing, what violence is doing to people, what violence is doing to women, to children, to the old people, to civilian. But for sure that many of them, it wasn't, well, good for the media, because what answer that I always have from my editors were saying that, well, people in the West or people in the other countries might not like to see this kind of pictures. But we were going through those actually pictures.
Yeah. Rupert, this is your next photograph.
Yeah, and this is one. I mean, one of the things with the Afghan people as military, a lot of the time when you showed up, they disappeared. Apart from the kids, so you get a lot of pictures of kids asking soldiers for sweets, and they always did quite well, for the media kind of side of things. In Helmand, I hardly ever saw any women, which was always, it was quite a sad thing. In day-to-day life, you used to seeing women around doing normal day-to-day stuff, whereas in Helmand, very rarely you would see, as soon as you walked anywhere, they'd be hidden away, they'd be locked away, and there wasn't much to do, and that interaction. So it was very much male. This picture was outside Kabul Lashkar Stadium, and they started doing live music again for the first time in 10 years because the Taliban had banned live music. And it's the faces on the guys that looking at me, the difference in the way that some had a bit of a joke. Third in from the right clearly hated me and didn't want me there. But I found it just interesting in how they were. But this was a good time of actual live music. So they were going to see an event which was being secured by the local police, the local army, the national Afghan National Army, with a small amount of British soldiers. It was my second tour, and it had moved on hugely from what it was before, which was a dominating force. And from a year and a half earlier when I was there, I would never have dreamt of this happening. So, it was a sign of the times of things moving forward, which was good for me.
Yeah. And this photo segues nicely into your next one, Massoud, little girls collecting water.
Yeah, well, actually, this is, I really like these pictures. And if you remember, Lynne, we were together in this picture. When I took this picture, we were going to Pakistani border with Red Cross and right, so to have a report about their activity. So yeah, for sure, because these villages are really remote and far away from all civilization and everything, so they were really kind of surprised to see a car, a vehicle here. And I was sitting in the front row, and I took my camera really fast and took like this picture and put it back from, inside the car, and then they disappeared. So this was a really short moment. And for the first time, I was so happy to take this picture on that, short time actually. And yeah, it was a village close to Pakistani border. The other, if you see a mountain in the background, the other side of the mountain is Pakistan, and we were in this side. And Pakistani army had that operation the other side, and most of the people from Pakistan were coming, through this mountain into Afghanistan. And yeah, I had a really good pictures from that activity actually.
Fond memories. And this looks like your colleagues in the Afghan services, Rupert.
Yeah, this was taken with the Afghan National Army on my second tour, and this was their counter IED team. Working with them, they were amazingly brave. And on my first tour, I went on the first single patrol with no British troops with the Afghan National Army. At this point, things started changing slightly with the Taliban infiltrated them. So this became a bit of a divide between the British forces and the Afghan National Army. We had to have guardian angels on, and then by my third tour, that divide was slightly more. But the guys that worked with them, they were brave, and it was sometimes too brave that they would just go ahead and walk. But there was some really amazing guys, and sitting down and having dinner with them. And I think as an individual photographer, when you got embedded with them, it was something that a lot of people didn't get before. It's a very individual thing that I could sort of understand their culture more and get that side of them, which most troops didn't, because they just work alongside them and they'd be quite segregated. Whereas I got to kind of know a few of the guys and see how they operate, and the majority of them were really good, brave, professional soldiers.
Indeed. Massoud, your next photo is your Pulitzer Prize winner, the girl in the green dress. Horrific photo by any standards. It still catches my throat and often makes me cry when I see it. Tell us something about that day.
Yeah, well, definitely it brings me a lot of sad, difficult, and heavy memories of that day. Well, yeah, it was a really difficult day for me, changed my life, and hurt me a lot, to be honest. And I was there when the explosion happened. I was wounded, and I tried to show the real happening that it was, going on there. And if you see a child lying, in front of Tarana's feet is her brother, and she just was in shock to see everybody around her was dead. The yellow one is one of her cousin, and the sitting girl who's crying also with the hair, black hair, is her sister. And the blue shirt girl also is the younger sister, that because she was closer to the explosion, her stomach was exploded. And after this explosion, I was one day after that I could get back to my own consciousness. I looked a lot for this girl, and I found her in emergency, and she was close to die. And well, thankfully that she's alive, but still she has problem from that explosion. And sometimes I go to visit them. Is much younger and adult now, and she's one time I just saw that she went to learn guitar, but couldn't because there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of shock on that explosion. And all of their families are exactly affected by that explosion a lot, and they're much depressed most of the time. Well, I I tried my best actually to help them to go to some other countries and use the help of some professions to get rid of all those shocks and PTSD that they have. But then unfortunately they are so poor, and our government is really, really weak, and I didn't have enough money also to do it, and they're living with that trauma, and they're always talking about it when I go there. And I mostly, when I go and visit them, I try to not talking about that day, but they just refer me again to that day, that because they just want to remember again that what really happened. I was the witness for them too. And it's really difficult to talk about all this story.
Indeed it is, but thank you for explaining it. It's quite difficult to look at. I want to open it up a little bit. I have a question here from Stuart Bernard, which I'm going to direct to you, Weeda. Stuart says, Assalamu alaikum. I operated in the south in 2007-8 in Uruzgan, Zabul, Kandahar and Helmand, and was defence attaché for the UK from 2014 until 2017 in Kabul. I saw so much improvement across my decade of involvement. What are your feelings? Have we begun to go backwards, or are we still in a better place than where we were in 2007? Weeda, take yourself off mute. Maybe you can address Stuart's question.
Thank you for that important question. I would not say, I would definitely say that we have come a long way, and there has been, as I mentioned, lots of achievements since 2001 in terms of education, in terms of building a democratic culture in the country, human rights, women's rights. The mere fact that Afghan media is one of the most dynamic and free in the region is one of the achievements, despite all the issues in terms of corruption within the government, in terms of security situation worsening. I would definitely say right now we are much better off than we were under the Taliban regime, definitely. And 20 years has been a long time to actually have a new generation of Afghans who are not who have had a different experience. They are educated, they are open-minded, they have been exposed to many different, if they've been out of the country through an education, to exposed to many different situations, and they acquire knowledge and skills that they've been contributing in the country. So Afghanistan is not the same on that in 96 and 93, from 93 and 96, that when the Taliban started taking over. So it is different. There is a level of awareness amongst the youth in Afghanistan, the educated population in Afghanistan, that they've lived a life that it didn't exist before the Taliban. And they're not willing to give up on those freedoms. They're not willing to give up on those achievements in favor of a peace, that a so-called peace that is not so certain at all. And there is no certainty with the Taliban that they would not go back to all those draconian laws that they were imposing in the country when they had the power in Afghanistan. And not also forget that in addition to what we normally see and have a picture of the Taliban being oppressing towards women, minority groups in Afghanistan were under oppression by the Taliban. The rights of minority groups is very important in Afghanistan, and their safety and all the achievements that we have had in Afghanistan are at stake here in these negotiations, the peace process in the country. And I wouldn't say that we are worse off and we have gone back, but this whole negotiations and Taliban's effort, in addition to other insurgent groups. Let's remember that Taliban is not the only group working, being active in Afghanistan. ISK, Islamic State in Khorasan, Al-Qaeda, and the rest are also active. All of these groups, insurgents and terrorist groups, are trying to halt those achievements, trying to go back, take Afghanistan back to the kind of country that it was under the Taliban's regime. They will, and the Afghan population, they're not ready to give up on these. Yes, the government is fragmented. Yes, it is corrupted. Yes, but generally the population, everyday people, normal, regular people, are not willing to give up on all of these achievements and values that they have in favor of a peace that it might not even happen.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Weeda. For you, Rupert, I've got a slew of questions. David Beachy wants to know what's your go-to camera. Mike O'Neill wants to know what your favourite Afghan tour moment is. Couple more coming. Oh, Richard Pendry. Rupert, I'm enjoying your pictures greatly, but do you think we Western news consumers have seen enough stuff taken from the point of view of the NATO forces by now, and it's time for more material to be done by the locals? Once you've had your say there, Rupert, a question for Massoud about ethics and the ethics of shock imagery. But first, Rupert, what do you say to your questioners?
I'm happy with any camera that I'm using. The best camera is the one that you've got on you. So you know, I'm not fussy. Obviously, if someone wants to give me a Leica, I'll happily have that. My best tour moments, I think, you know, they're multiple. I loved deploying on tour. I think that one of the things that really got me was working with journalists more. I'd find myself attached and bonding with journalists that came in, because I'd be the photographer that would go out with them, or videographer on times, and I'd sort of stay with them for longer periods of times and float around the different units. It's quite a lonely job doing that. So I think some of my best times was working with people like Quentin Somerville and Paul McNamara and people like that came out and you know, sort of shined a bit of light and brought a bit of home with them, and a bit of difference, and I learned a lot from them. And I think that last picture summed up, you know, we did put it into the hands of the Afghan security forces. That's what we were there to do, and that's what we did. And that last picture pretty much summed that up.
Yeah, indeed. And turning to you, Massoud, Mike O'Neill asks a question of ethics. Do you feel there's a place in modern photojournalism for shock imagery? And Rob Tillotson says, as a photographer for the Army cadets, sometimes I struggle with all the equipment getting in the way, running to get in the right position, etc. But that's in a safe setting, nothing like a combat situation. Have you ever missed an opportunity due to the equipment or the physical exertion? We saw your first photo there with the jacket and the helmet and the hat under the helmet and all of that. What do you say?
Well, for the first question, well, I think whatever happening in the human society, it should be shown for everybody to understand and to know the situation in the other, societies. We have a really important and famous expression saying that all human beings are like part of one body, And if one part of that body is in pain, then all over the body cannot be calm and cannot, be like actually the all bodies should understand that pain to solve it. This is what we have it in our culture. So for sure that everybody can decide what to see and what to watch. Everybody had that option, but what is my responsibility is to show that what's going on in my country, that everybody is involved on it. We cannot say that this is the only war that we make it. No, everybody is involved of this war, and I think everybody should know about it. Yes, and the other one?
A political question from David Short. Are you there, David? Would you like to ask the question yourself? We still have a little bit of time left. You can unmute yourself and shout it out. Perhaps not. Okay, David's question is, do you think Afghanistan would be in the position it is in if the USSR had not invaded in 1979? Maybe Weeda, you can address that question. If the USSR hadn't invaded in 1979, would we be where we are today? Unmute yourself, don't forget.
That's an
Weeda,
excellent question. Oh, sorry, that's an excellent question, and so I have to admit I haven't given it much thought because counterfactual arguments and anyhow, it is interesting. Afghanistan was a different trajectory, definitely, with the king was in place, and then when the king was overthrown by the communist revolution in the country. So I would say if the USSR had, well, maybe I should give a little bit of historical background, that the communist revolution happened in 78, 79, if I'm not mistaken, and then 78, and then the Soviet troops entered Afghanistan in 79. And so if the troops haven't entered, if the Soviet hadn't invaded in Afghanistan, there was a revolution, a communist revolution, which had taken place in the country. So if we are going to play that trajectory, I would step a bit back and say Afghanistan would have been in a different situation if it still had continued with the king. But once the revolution happened, things were set on a path that the invasion by the Soviet army was almost inevitable. And the involvement of the US, the involvement of Western countries in supporting the Mujahideen, and that made this side of it also inevitable. So instead of, yes, things would have been different if the revolution hadn't happened and Afghanistan had remained under the monarchy, and it was moving on towards implementing some reforms and taking Afghanistan to a different direction. So in a sense, yes, if the invasion of Afghanistan, the Soviet troops hasn't happened, we wouldn't be in this situation. Afghanistan would have followed this different historical trajectory over the past now 40 years.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's time to wrap up. So maybe each one of our panel can say, where do you see us going? Maybe start with you, Weeda. Just, a minute or 2 minutes, keep it very tight. Where do you see us going from here? We are where we are. What's next?
I would think that the next the next is all eyes are on the negotiation with the Taliban, negotiation for peace and the negotiation with the Taliban. And the most important thing is that during this whole process, we shall not forget who the Taliban were and who they are right now. And we shall not sacrifice the rights of women, the rights of minority groups in Afghanistan, for a hasty peace agreement with the Taliban. And we shall not forget that we shall not forget what happened during the Taliban's regime, and to strike a peace deal that is not in favor of a number of warlords in the country, and a number of militia commanders in the country, and a number of politicians who are essentially thinking about their own benefits. We need to have a comprehensive peace deal that is a positive peace and would lead to long-term sustainable peace, while doing our best to actually safeguard all the achievements that have been made since 2001.
What about you, Waliullah? What would you round this all up, and what are your predictions for the future?
Well, I think we need to understand that the reality on the ground is that we're moving towards the Turkey summit and the way forward in the intra-Afghan negotiations, and the international community's vision for Afghanistan. I think we will go for a political settlement. I hope that political settlement will consider what our colleague Ms. Mehran also mentioned, that there will be a political order, the rights of minorities, ethnic and religious minorities, and the principal rights that all Afghans should be considered. And of course, we have to voice our concerns and voice ourselves, nationally and internationally, to be heard in the negotiations tables, so that Afghanistan should not be subcontracted to some regional proxies or regional countries again.
Massoud, what about you? What are your predictions for the future?
What is going on right now in Afghanistan, as I told also during my presentation, is not only related to Afghanistan or the government or the Taliban that are fighting here together. For sure that we need an agreement, a regional agreement for solving all these problems. Taliban are not insurgency from inside Afghanistan, they are from Pakistan. We should understand what Pakistan wants. And definitely we know that what Pakistan wants. They have a proxy war with India inside Afghanistan. At the same time, the East and West, Russia, China, and the US and West also have a proxy war inside Afghanistan. So definitely before that, everything happening in Istanbul between Afghan government and Taliban, these players, they should reach an agreement. And if they reach the agreement, then we will have peace. If you closely see the Moscow conference, the China, the US, Russia, and Pakistan had another negotiation and conversation before the Afghan talks. That shows that these talks is not anything related with us. We as Afghan people, we don't have anything, we shouldn't kind of be really optimistic about that. Whatever the players, the outside players wants will happen inside Afghanistan, unfortunately.
Indeed. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I seem to have bounced off and bounced back. My apologies. But thank you to everybody. Rupert, Waliullah, Weeda, Massoud, it's been just a wonderful opportunity to listen to you talk and share your work with us. Thank you. And again, a reminder to everybody, with a big thanks for joining in, of the crowdfunding website, which has already received some donations this evening, Afghanistan20years.com, for Rupert and Massoud's 20 years, look back on 20 years of war in Afghanistan later this year. Thanks again. Everybody, please keep a close eye on the Frontline website for future events, and you'll also be able to see the link to Afghanistan20years.com on there tomorrow as well. Thank you, everybody. Oh, you've got something to say. What, Massoud? Massoud's never without the last word.
Well, actually, yes, I just wanted to say everyone that listening to me is that, well, if we have the luck and if we make the exhibition, well, I have a lot of good pictures too. I have a lot of hopeful pictures too. I have a lot of pictures of women fighting for their rights, and they were so happy and hopeful too. I hope that I can show them as well.
Me too. Thanks a lot, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.